The world for 3 years had been viewed through a lens called Liam. It was a warm, gilded filter that made the mundane magical. The tedious walk to our 8 a.m. literature class was an adventure because his hand was in mine. The terrible cafeteria coffee tasted like ambrosia because we'd share a cup, his laughter a richer sweetness than any sugar. He was my high school sweetheart, the boy next door who'd morphed into the man I thought I'd build a future with. We'd planned it all, from the shared dorm room against the rules, but we were clever, to the tiny apartment off campus, to the golden retriever we'd name Barnaby. College was supposed to be the grand, sprawling canvas where we painted that future together. The first semester at Northwood University was a whirlwind of orientation and frantic map reading, but we were a team. A unit. Liam and Alara was a single hyphenated word. He was my anchor in the chaotic sea of new faces and I was his. Or so I'd thought. The shift was subtle at first. A text message left on read for a whole day. A cancelled movie night because he was swamped with econ readings. I, the devoted girlfriend, buried my flicker of unease under a mountain of understanding. He was adjusting. College was demanding. I couldn't be clingy. The day the lens shattered was a Tuesday. It was one of those perfect crystalline autumn afternoons where the sun gilded the red brick of the humanities building and the air smelled of dying leaves and infinite possibility. I'd just aced a philosophy midterm, and the euphoria of it had me practically floating. I'd texted Liam, "Done. Meet me at the oak tree? I have news and a craving for those terrible pretzels." He hadn't replied, but I was too buzzed to care. I'd find him. I'd surprise him. I cut through the quad, a smile playing on my lips, my mind already composing the triumphant retelling of my essay on Aristotelian ethics. And then I saw them. Beneath the very oak tree that had been our spot since the first week of school was Liam. His back was to me, his familiar broad shoulders encased in the dark green sweater I'd bought him for his birthday. And he was not alone. A girl was pressed against the rough bark of the tree, and he was caging her in, his body curved over hers in an intimate, possessive arc. Her hair was a cascade of honey blonde, a shade I'd once wistfully considered in a magazine. Her laugh, a high, tinkling sound, carried across the quad as he leaned in. The world didn't slow down. It didn't blur. It became hyper-focused, every detail searing itself onto my retinas with brutal, high-definition clarity. I saw the way his fingers, the same fingers that had endlessly traced patterns on my palm, were now tangled in that honey-blonde hair. I saw the tilt of his head, the one I knew so well, as he closed the final inch between them. He kissed her. It wasn't a shy, tentative peck. It was a deep, claiming, hungry kiss. The kind of kiss that spoke of practice, of stolen moments that had built to this very public declaration. A strange sound, like the air being let out of a balloon, escaped my lips. I stood frozen, a statue of shock planted in the middle of the bustling pathway. Students flowed around me, a river of chatter and life, oblivious to the cataclysm happening in my chest. The euphoria from my exam curdled into a cold, leaden weight in my stomach. The gilded lens through which I'd viewed my life didn't just crack. It exploded into a million glittering, jagged shards. I waited for the panic to rise. For the hot, humiliating tears. For the scream building in my throat to break free. That's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to run, to cry, to confront, to shatter. But I didn't. A different instinct, cold and sharp and entirely new, took hold. It was as if the part of me that was Liam's girlfriend had been instantly vaporized, and in its place stood someone else. Someone with clear, cold eyes and a still, quiet heart. The pain was there, a raw, gaping wound, but it was instantly cauterized by a wave of pure, undiluted fury. My gaze, dry and unblinking, stayed on them. I memorized the scene. The way her hand fluttered to his chest. The way he smiled against her mouth. Then my eyes drifted away from them and scanned the periphery of the quad, as if searching for a tool, a weapon, an answer. And that's when I saw him. Leaning against the stone archway of the library about 50 feet away, was a guy watching the same scene with an expression of profound, bored disdain. He was tall, with an athlete's lean build, dressed in dark jeans and a simple black t-shirt that did little to hide the corded muscle in his arms. His hair was the color of rich espresso, messy in a way that looked intentional. But it was his face that held me, all sharp, elegant planes and a sardonic curve to his mouth. And he was, without a doubt, the most handsome man I had ever seen. He wasn't just watching, he was analyzing. And his focus wasn't on the new girl. It was on Liam. There was a history in that look. A simmering, undisguised animosity. In that single crystallizing moment, a plan didn't so much form as it descended upon me, fully formed and terrifying in its simplicity. It wasn't a plan of messy confrontation or pathetic pleading. It was a plan of elegant, devastating annihilation. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I took a deep, steadying breath, the first since my world had ended. I smoothed down my sweater. And with a calmness that felt both alien and powerful, I started walking. Not towards Liam and the honey-blonde usurper. Not towards the dorm to weep into a pillow. I walked towards the handsome stranger in the archway. Towards Liam's enemy. His name I would soon learn was Kalen Thorne. And he was about to become my favorite new project. He noticed my approach. His dark eyes, which had been fixed on Liam with such contempt, flicked towards me. There was no surprise in them, only a flicker of cool assessment. He straightened up slightly, crossing his arms over his chest. I stopped in front of him, the sounds of the quad fading into a dull roar. I met his gaze, my own surprisingly steady. "They make a sickeningly perfect couple, don't they?" I said, my voice remarkably even. I gestured with my chin towards the oak tree, where Liam was now laughing, his arms slung around the new girl's shoulders. Kalen's eyebrow quirked up. A slow, intrigued smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. "That's one word for it," he replied, his voice a low, resonant baritone. I was thinking more along the lines of cliché. "Ilara," I said, extending my hand. He looked at my hand for a beat, then back at my face, his smile widening a fraction. He took it. His grip was firm, his skin warm. "Kalen," he said. "And I have a feeling this is about to get very, very interesting." Kalen's handshake was firm, his gaze unervingly direct. He didn't let go of my hand immediately, his dark eyes searching mine, as if trying to decipher the blueprint of the bomb I'd just decided to build. "Interesting is the goal," I replied, gently extracting my hand. The contact was electric, but in a way that felt dangerous, like touching a live wire. This wasn't about attraction. This was about power. "I think we might have a mutually beneficial problem to discuss." He gestured towards the library behind him. "After you." We found a secluded corner on the 3rd floor, tucked away between towering shelves of dusty philosophy texts. The air smelled of old paper and quiet desperation. It was the perfect place for a conspiracy. We sat opposite each other at a heavy wooden table, the surface scarred with generations of carved initials and forgotten equations. "So," Kalen began, leaning back in his chair, the picture of casual indifference. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "Liam Miller's now ex-girlfriend, I presume?" The title, ex-girlfriend, was a fresh stab to the heart, but I didn't let it show. "Was it that obvious?" "The look on your face wasn't one of casual curiosity," he said dryly. "It was the look of someone watching their entire future get cheerfully torched." "I'm familiar with the sentiment." I took a steadying breath. "And you? What's your story with Liam?" A muscle in his jaw twitched. "We were roommates. First semester. It was a match made in hell. He's a sanctimonious, backstabbing prick who believes his own charm offensive is a substitute for having a spine." The venom in his voice was genuine, a refreshing contrast to the cool facade. "Backstabbing how?" Kalen's lips tightened. "We were both up for a prestigious summer internship at a tech startup. Highly competitive. We'd helped each other with the application materials, or so I thought. I shared my project idea with him in confidence. A few days before the deadline, I found out he'd submitted an almost identical proposal, framing it as his own original work. He got the interview. I got a polite rejection letter citing lack of innovative thought. He played the innocent, of course. Said it was a coincidence of parallel thinking. No one believed the scholarship kid from the wrong side of the tracks over the golden boy with the perfect smile. There was the root of the animosity. It was more than just personality clashes. It was a violation of trust, an act of professional sabotage. My pain was personal, raw, emotional. His was professional, cold, and intellectual. Together they formed a potent complementary fuel. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "That's despicable." He shrugged, a practiced gesture of nonchalance that didn't fool me. "Water under the bridge. I found another internship. A better one, actually. But the principle of the thing still pisses me off. Principles are important, I agreed, my voice soft. So, let's talk about principles. And revenge. His eyes glinted with a feral light. I'm listening. I'm not interested in a screaming match. I'm not interested in slashing his tires or keying his car. That's messy and juvenile, I began, leaning forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I want to dismantle him. Piece by piece. I want to take everything he thinks is his social standing, his academic confidence, his shiny new relationship, and I want to show him how fragile it all really is. I want him to feel as small and insignificant as he made me feel 5 minutes ago. Kalen was watching me with a new kind of intensity, a slow smile spreading across his face. Go on. You said it yourself. He's a golden boy. His currency is his reputation. His charm. His perceived superiority. We need to devalue that currency. Publicly. Systematically. And how do you propose we do that? We become his shadow, I said, the plan unfolding in my mind as I spoke. We become the people he can't escape. You're in his academic sphere. I was in his personal one. Together we have the complete map of his life. We know his weaknesses. His insecurities. Which are? Kalen prompted, genuinely curious. He's deeply insecure about his intelligence. He masks it with bravado. He's terrified of being shown up, of being second best. And he's pathologically jealous. I never saw it fully until now, but looking back, the signs were there. Kalen nodded slowly. That tracks. The internship thing, it wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure I didn't. So your plan is to, what? Outshine him academically and make him jealous? Seems a bit straightforward. It's the execution that matters, I said. We're not just going to be better than him. We're going to be an untouchable unit. A power couple, if you will, that makes him and his new fling look like the amateur hour they are. We're going to be everywhere he is, but better dressed, better connected, and visibly, disgustingly happy. We're going to be living, breathing proof that his choices were not just hurtful but strategically stupid. A power couple, Kalen repeated, a slow, appreciative grin spreading across his face. It transformed him from broodingly handsome to devastating. You want us to fake a relationship? Is that a problem? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the risky part. This required his full, committed participation. He let out a short, sharp laugh. Problem? It's diabolical. I love it. The irony is beautiful. He dumps you and you immediately land in the arms of the one guy on campus he genuinely can't stand. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his voice a low murmur. But it has to be convincing, Alara. We can't just be two people who are seen together. We have to sell it. We have to be inseparable. We have to look at each other like the sun rises and sets in the other's eyes. A flutter of nervousness, the first I'd felt since the kiss, went through me. I'm an excellent actress. So am I, he said, his eyes holding mine. But the best performances are the ones that feel real. We'll need backstory. Inside jokes. We'll need to know each other's coffee order, our favorite books, the name of our first pet. Mittens, I said automatically. A grumpy tabby who hated everyone but me. Zeus, he countered. A golden retriever with more heart than brains. We're building a foundation already. For the next hour we plotted. We exchanged class schedules, phone numbers, social media handles. We identified key events. The upcoming Sigma Chi party, the fall semester showcase where Liam was presenting a paper, the intramural soccer finals where Kalen was a star player and Liam was a mediocre substitute. We mapped out our campaign of psychological warfare like generals before a battle. As we stood to leave, the library was growing dark, the sunset casting long, dramatic shadows through the tall windows. Our first public appearance, Kalen said, offering me his arm. Let's go get dinner at the dining hall. The one he always goes to on Tuesdays. I looked at his proffered arm, then up at his face, which was now a carefully constructed mask of warm affection. I took it, my hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow. The contact sent another jolt through me, but this time I leaned into it. This was my armor now. Ready? He asked. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. The ghost of the girl I was 2 hours ago was gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, and fiercely determined. Let's go break his world, I said. And as we walked out of the library arm in arm, the first brick in Liam's undoing was laid. Walking across the quad with Kaylin's arm linked with mine was like stepping onto a stage. The evening air was cool, a stark contrast to the feverish heat of my resolve. Every laugh, every casual brush of his shoulder against mine, was a calculated performance. And I was a quick study. So the Econ 101 study group, Kaylin murmured, his head tilted towards me as if sharing a delicious secret. He always sits in the back by the window and contributes just enough to look involved without actually doing any of the heavy lifting. Noted, I said, offering him a smile that I hoped looked soft and genuine. And he hates it when people are late. Thinks it's a sign of moral failing. Kaylin chuckled, a low warm sound that seemed to vibrate through my arm. Perfect. We'll be fashionably late to everything. The main dining hall was a cacophony of clattering trays and student chatter. It was also, as Kaylin had predicted, Liam's Tuesday night haunt for their bro dinner, with his teammates from the club soccer team. We spotted them immediately, a loud, boisterous group taking up 2 long tables near the back. Liam was at the center, holding court, his arms slung around the chair of the honey-blonde girl. Her name, I'd learned from a quick, painful dive into social media, was Chloe. I felt Kaylin's arm tense slightly under my hand. Steady, he whispered, his breath ghosting my ear. Remember, you're the one who upgraded. He was right. As we moved through the food line, I made a point of not looking their way. I laughed a little too loudly at something Kaylin said about the mystery meat. I let my hand rest on his back as we decided on a table. We chose one that was directly in Liam's sightline, but far enough away to force him to watch, to wonder. The moment we sat down, the real work began. Kaylin pulled out my chair for me. He leaned in to listen to me with an intensity that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We'd agreed on a backstory. We'd met in the library a few weeks ago, bonded over a shared hatred for our obtuse philosophy professor, and had been talking ever since. It was vague enough to be plausible, yet specific enough to sound real. About 10 minutes into our meal, I felt the weight of a stare. I glanced up and my eyes collided with Liam's. He was frozen, a forkful of pasta halfway to his mouth, his expression a perfect canvas of stunned disbelief. Chloe was talking to him, but he wasn't hearing a word. He was looking at me, then at Kaylin, then back at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. I gave him a small, polite, utterly dismissive smile, the kind you'd give a casual acquaintance, and then immediately turned back to Kaylin, reaching across the table to steal a fry from his plate. He's watching, I said under my breath, my heart thumping a wild, triumphant rhythm against my ribs. I know, Kaylin said, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at me. It was a good smile. A convincing one. He just dropped his fork. The victory was small, but it was a victory nonetheless. We finished our dinner in a bubble of feigned intimacy, and as we stood to leave, Kaylin laced his fingers through mine. His hand was large and warm, his grip firm. It felt different from holding Liam's hand. Less familiar, more solid. As we passed their table, Liam stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. "Alara," he said, his voice tight. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I stopped, turning to face him with a look of mild curiosity. Kaylin stopped too, his hand still firmly in mine, a silent, solid presence at my side. "Liam," I said, my tone neutral. "Hi. What's up?" He glanced at our joined hands, his jaw tightening. Alone? If that's okay." I felt Kaylin give my hand a slight, reassuring squeeze. I looked at Liam, at his confused, slightly hurt expression, and I felt a flicker of the old pain. But it was quickly smothered by the cold, satisfying ember of revenge. "I'm kind of in the middle of something," I said, my voice sweet but firm. "Maybe another time. It was good to see you." I turned to Chloe, who was watching the exchange with wide, uncertain eyes. "You must be Chloe. I've heard so much about you." The lie slipped out, smooth as silk. "We have Bio 210 together, right? With Dr. Evans?" That midterm was brutal. Chloe blinked, thrown by the normalcy. "Oh. Yeah. It was awful." "Well, good luck with it," I said with a bright, meaningless smile. Then I turned back to Kaylin. "Ready, baby? We said we'd meet Sarah at the library by 8. Baby." The word felt foreign on my tongue, but it had the desired effect. Liam flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Yeah, let's go," Kaylin said, his voice a warm rumble. He nodded at Liam, a curt, dismissive gesture. "Miller." And we walked away, leaving a stunned silence in our wake. We didn't look back. We walked out of the dining hall through the double doors and into the cool night air. Once we were out of sight around the corner of the building, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My legs felt shaky. Kalen dropped my hand and the sudden absence of his warmth was jarring. "You," he said, turning to face me, a look of pure, unadulterated admiration on his face, "were magnificent. That was a masterclass." A shaky laugh escaped me. "I think I'm going to be sick." "Don't you dare," he said, his grin widening. "That was just the opening shot. Did you see his face? He's completely unmoored. He was prepared for tears, for screaming. He was not prepared for that." He gestured back towards the dining hall. "For you to be perfectly fine. Better than fine. For you to be with me." The way he said, "me," carried a weight of its own. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a statement of fact. In the complex social hierarchy of Northwood, Kalen Thorne was a different kind of royalty. Not the fraternity president, all-American charm of Liam, but something darker, more intriguing and intellectually formidable. "It worked," I whispered, the reality of it finally sinking in. The first part of the plan had been executed flawlessly. "It worked," he confirmed. "Now the hard part." "What's the hard part?" "Keeping it up," he said, his expression turning serious. "This isn't a one-night performance. This is a long-running play. We have to be consistent. We have to be believable at the Sigma Chi party this weekend. That's the main event. The Sigma Chi party. The social event of the season. Where Liam would be with all his friends, with Chloe on his arm, expecting to be the king of the castle. And we were going to storm the gates. "I'll be ready," I said, my voice gaining strength. The nausea was receding, replaced by a fresh wave of determination. "I know you will," Kalen said. He looked at me for a long moment, his head tilted. "You're nothing like I thought you'd be." "What did you think I'd be?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Softer, I guess. More breakable." I said, the truth of it stark between us. "Then I got broken. Now I'm just sharp edges." A slow smile touched his lips. "Sharp edges are useful. They cut." He glanced at his phone. "I've got a lab. I'll walk you back to your dorm." "No," I said, surprising myself. "I think I'll stay out here for a bit. Clear my head." He nodded, understanding. "Hey, I'll text you later. We need to coordinate our outfits for Saturday. Can't have our power couple aesthetic being off." I managed a genuine smile. "Wouldn't dream of it." He turned and walked away, his hands shoved in his pockets, a solitary, confident figure disappearing into the twilight. I leaned against the cool brick of the building, the echoes of the evening replaying in my mind. The shock on Liam's face. The warmth of Kalen's hand. The feeling of wielding my own pain as a weapon. It was just the beginning. But as I stood there in the gathering dark, I realized something with chilling clarity. The performance hadn't just been for Liam. Some of it, terrifyingly, had felt a little too real. The days between the dining hall encounter and the Sigma Chi party were a whirlwind of strategic preparation. Kalen and I were in constant communication, a flurry of texts that ranged from the practical to the absurdly detailed. "Kalen, found out he's wearing a blue button-down. Hey, I'm going with black. You should wear that red dress you mentioned. It's a declaration of war. Me, it's maroon. And it's not a war, it's a hostile takeover. Kalen, even better. My place 9 p.m. We'll arrive together. Make an entrance." The make an entrance part had my stomach in knots. I wasn't a make an entrance kind of person. With Liam, I'd been the supportive girlfriend in the background. Now I was being thrust into the spotlight, arm in arm with the campus's most enigmatic figure. Saturday night found me standing in front of the full-length mirror in my dorm room, critically examining my reflection. The maroon dress was a statement. It was simple, sleeveless, and fell to just above my knees, but the color made my skin glow and my dark hair seem richer. I'd taken more time with my makeup than I had in months, emphasizing my eyes. I looked confident, powerful. A far cry from the girl who'd been frozen in the quad just days before. My roommate Sarah whistled. "Wow, Alara. You clean up good. Big date with Mr. Tall, dark, and devastating." "Something like that," I said, applying a final coat of mascara. My hands were steady. "I still can't believe you and Kalen Thorne," she said, shaking her head. It's so random. And so hot. When did this even happen? It just did, I said, the practice lie feeling easier this time. We clicked. At 8:55 p.m., I stood outside Kaylin's off-campus apartment, a modern complex popular with juniors and seniors. He opened the door before I could even knock, and for a moment we just stared at each other. He looked incredible. The simple black shirt and dark jeans should have been underwhelming, but on him they were a masterpiece of understated style. The fabric stretched taut across his shoulders, and his eyes, usually so guarded, did a slow, appreciative sweep from my heels to my eyes. Wow, he said, his voice low. Red was the right call. It's maroon, I corrected automatically, a nervous smile touching my lips. Tonight it's red, he said, stepping aside to let me in. His apartment was tidy, minimalist, with shelves overflowing with books and a high-end laptop open on a sleek desk. It smelled like clean laundry and sandalwood. You ready for this? As I'll ever be. He picked up 2 glasses from the kitchen counter, handing one to me. It was filled with an amber liquid. Whiskey. For courage. Or for method acting. Your choice. I took a sip, the liquid burning a warm path down my throat. Both. We went over the plan one last time. We'd arrive at 9:30 after the party had started, but before Liam was too drunk to be coherent. We'd stay for 2 hours. We'd be affectionate but not obnoxious. We'd circulate, talk to people, be a charming, united front. We'd specifically engage with people in Liam's inner circle. The key, Kaylin said, finishing his whiskey, is to make them come to us. We're the prize. He's the consolation. By the time we approached the Sigma Chi house, the bass was thumping through the walls and the front lawn was swarming with students. This was it. The stage was set. Kaylin's hand found the small of my back, a possessive, guiding touch that sent a shiver through me. Showtime, he murmured in my ear. We walked through the front door, and just as we'd planned, a path seemed to clear for us. I felt dozens of eyes on us, heard the whispers start. Is that Kaylin Thorne? Who's that with him? Is that Liam's ex? The air was thick with sweat, beer, and cheap perfume, but we moved through it like we were in our own pristine bubble. Kaylin guided me towards the kitchen, his hand never leaving my back. He grabbed 2 beers, opened one with a practiced flick of his wrist, and handed it to me. He leaned against the counter, pulling me slightly in front of him so my back was against his chest, his arms loosely around my waist. It was a position of total possession but also of protection. I could feel the solid warmth of him through the thin fabric of my dress, and for a moment, I let myself lean into it, let the performance become a shield. And then I saw them. Across the crowded room by the makeshift DJ booth, stood Liam and Chloe. He was holding a red plastic cup, but he wasn't drinking. He was staring at us, his face pale, his expression a thundercloud of confusion and burgeoning anger. Chloe, dressed in a fluttery pink dress, was trying to talk to him, but he was ignoring her, his entire focus locked on Kaylin's hands on my hips. I felt a surge of power so intense it was dizzying. I tilted my head back, resting it against Kaylin's shoulder, and looked up at him. He's watching, I whispered. Kaylin didn't look at Liam. He looked down at me, his dark eyes soft in the strobe-lit darkness. He brushed a stray strand of hair from my cheek, his fingers lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Let him watch, he said, his voice a low rumble that only I could hear. For the next hour we were flawless. We danced, but not like maniacs. We moved together, a slow, intimate sway in the middle of the frantic crowd that was more potent than any passionate grinding. We talked to people. Kaylin would introduce me, his arms slung casually over my shoulder. This is Alara. The way he said my name with a kind of reverent pride was a work of art. I found myself talking to Mark, one of Liam's soccer buddies. Dude, Liam's tripping, Mark said, his words slurred. He said you were a wreck. You look amazing. And with Thorne? Savage. I just smiled. People change. Later, as I was coming out of the bathroom, I found myself face to face with Liam in the cramped hallway. He was alone. Alara, what the hell is this? He demanded, his voice tight. He smelled strongly of beer. What is what, Liam? Asked, my tone cool. You and Kaylin? Seriously? The guy is an asshole. He's using you to get back at me for that internship thing. I raised an eyebrow. Using me? That's rich coming from you. And for the record, he's been nothing but a gentleman. Something you seem to have forgotten how to be. He flinched. Look about Chloe, it just happened. I was going to tell you. I was confused. You don't look confused now, I said, glancing pointedly towards where Chloe was standing looking lost. You look committed. As am I. Now if you'll excuse me, my boyfriend is waiting for me. I walked away from him, my head high, and found Kalen by the back porch. He was talking to a professor from the computer science department, but his eyes tracked me the entire way. When I reached his side, he instinctively wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. Everything okay? He asked softly, his concern seeming genuine. Perfect, I said, and I meant it. We left the party soon after, the cool night air a welcome relief. We walked in silence for a block, the sounds of the party fading behind us. The performance was over. The curtain had fallen. I expected him to drop the act immediately to put space between us. But he didn't. His arms stayed around my waist, his steps slowing to match mine. You were, he began, then shook his head as if searching for the right word. Transcendent. I wish you could have seen his face when you called me your boyfriend. I thought he was going to spontaneously combust. I laughed, the sound light and free in the quiet night. It felt good. We reached the path that split towards our respective homes. He stopped and turned to face me. The streetlight cast long shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw. This, he said, gesturing vaguely between us. This started as a game. But you're a force of nature, Alara. His gaze was intense, no longer playing for an audience. It was just him looking at just me. The line between our performance and reality, so carefully drawn just hours ago, was suddenly terrifyingly blurry. Kalen, I started, but I didn't know what to say. He leaned in, and for a heart-stopping moment I thought he was going to kiss me. My breath caught in my throat. But he stopped just inches from my face, his eyes searching mine. Then he straightened up and the moment was gone. I'll walk you to your door, he said, his voice back to its usual controlled tone. But as we walked the final distance, the silence between us was no longer that of co-conspirators. It was charged with something new, something unplanned, and infinitely more dangerous. The first act of our revenge had been a roaring success. But the second act was threatening to rewrite the entire script. The Monday after the Sigma Chi party, the campus felt different. It was as if the social tectonic plates had shifted, and I was standing on new, unfamiliar ground. Whispers followed me, but they were no longer tinged with pity. They were laced with curiosity, respect, and a healthy dose of fear. I was no longer just Liam's ex. I was Kalen Thorne's girlfriend. And more than that, I was the girl who had faced down her public humiliation not with tears, but with a cold, stunning defiance. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from people I hadn't spoken to in years. The most satisfying and unsettling was a text from Liam himself. Liam, we need to talk. For real this time. What you're doing is dangerous. I showed it to Kalen when we met for coffee between classes. We'd fallen into a routine, meeting at the campus cafe every morning. It was part of the plan, of course, but it had also become the best part of my day. Kalen read the text, a smirk playing on his lips. Dangerous. He's scared. He's lost control of the narrative and he hates it. He handed the phone back to me. Don't reply. Let him stew. I nodded, slipping my phone back into my bag. That's the plan. He studied me over the rim of his coffee cup. You're handling this better than I expected. Handling what? The attention. The fallout. Most people would be a mess. I told you, I said, stirring my latte. The messy part of me got left under that oak tree. He was quiet for a moment. Did it? His question hung in the air between us. It was the same unspoken tension that had lingered after the party. The facade we presented to the world was solid, impenetrable. But in these quiet, unscripted moments, it was developing hairline fractures. The next phase of the plan was academic. The fall semester showcase was in 2 weeks, where top students presented their research. Liam was presenting his paper on neoclassical economic models in modern policy, a topic he'd been bragging about for months. Kalen was also presenting on something far more esoteric and complex involving quantum computing algorithms. Our goal was simple: make Liam's presentation look like a child's book report. This required a different kind of intimacy. We started spending our evenings in the library or at his apartment, surrounded by textbooks and lit by the blue glow of his laptop screen. I helped Kalen refine his presentation, using my humanities background to make his technical jargon more accessible. He, in turn, helped me dissect the fundamental flaws in Liam's thesis, which I would then casually bring up in conversations with mutual friends. It was during one of these late-night study sessions that the first major crack appeared. It was past midnight. We were at his apartment, sprawled on the floor amidst a sea of highlighted printouts and empty coffee mugs. I was reading aloud from a dense philosophy text, trying to find a conceptual link for his conclusion, when I stumbled over a complicated German word. Something, I muttered, squinting at the page. Zersitzung, Kalen said without looking up from his notes, his pronunciation perfect. I stared at him. You speak German? A little, he said, finally meeting my gaze. Oma insisted. She said English was a language for commerce, but German was a language for philosophers and poets. I knew he was on a full academic scholarship. I knew he was brilliant. But this was a new layer. What else don't I know about you, Kalen Thorne? He set his pen down. I play the piano. Not well, but I find it calming. I'm allergic to strawberries. And I have a weirdly encyclopedic knowledge of 15th century Venetian naval history. A genuine laugh bubbled out of me. Why? He shrugged, a shy, almost vulnerable gesture I'd never seen from him before. I don't know. It's just interesting. What about you? What's a secret Alara fact? I thought for a moment. I'm terrified of earthworms. Like irrationally. And I can recite the entire script of The Princess Bride from memory. His smile was soft, real. Inconceivable. We lapsed into a comfortable silence, the initial goal of the evening forgotten. We were no longer just co-conspirators. We were two people sharing pieces of themselves. I never thanked you, I said quietly, tracing the pattern on his rug with my finger. For what? For this. For going along with my insane plan. You didn't have to. He was quiet for so long I thought he hadn't heard me. Yes, I did, he finally said, his voice low. When I saw you standing there watching him, I saw myself. That same feeling of being utterly invalidated. By someone who didn't even think twice about it. He paused. But it's not just about that anymore. My heart stuttered. It's not. He looked at me and the intensity in his eyes was no longer for an audience. It was just for me. No. It's not. The air between us was thick with everything we weren't saying. The revenge plot had been the foundation of our relationship, but something else was being built on top of it, something real and fragile and terrifying. The following day we ran into Liam in the science building atrium. He was with Chloe, but the easy affection they'd had under the oak tree was gone. He looked tired, strained. Chloe was clinging to his arm, but his body was stiff. Alara, Liam said, his voice tight. Kalen. Liam, I said politely. Chloe. How are you? We're great, Chloe said a little too brightly. Liam ignored her, his eyes fixed on me. I heard you've been telling people my thesis is intellectually derivative. I gave him a bland smile. I said it relied heavily on Smith and Keynes without offering a new synthesis. That's not derivative, it's just academically safe. But I'm sure it will be a very competent presentation. It was a perfectly calibrated insult delivered with a smile. I saw the flash of fury in his eyes. He was used to being the smartest guy in the room and I had just publicly questioned it. Kalen stepped in, his hand finding the small of my back. Alara's just passionate about rigorous analysis. You should hear what she said about my first draft. He looked down at me with a fondness that didn't feel like acting. She's brutal. And always right. The implication was clear. We have intellectual intimacy. You have a girlfriend who probably doesn't know Keynes from a keystone. Liam's jaw worked. He looked from my face to Kalen's hand on my back and I saw something in him break. The confusion and anger were gone, replaced by a raw, gut-wrenching hurt. Right? He muttered, his shoulders slumping. Well, we have to go. He practically dragged Chloe away. As they disappeared around the corner, I expected to feel a surge of triumph. This was what I wanted. This was the breakdown I had orchestrated. But the feeling that washed over me was hollow. Kalen's hand was still on my back. You okay? I looked up at him, at the genuine concern in his eyes, and the hollowness inside me began to fill with a different, more complicated emotion. The revenge had been sweet, but it was also ashes in my mouth. The plan was working perfectly. Liam was breaking down. So why did I feel like I was the one who was about to shatter? The hollow feeling I'd experienced after confronting Liam in the atrium didn't go away. It festered, a quiet counterpoint to the public victories. Our campaign was a resounding success. Liam's social confidence was in tatters. He and Chloe were often seen arguing in public, their perfect couple facade crumbling under the pressure we exerted. In class he was withdrawn, his contributions lackluster. The golden boy was tarnishing before everyone's eyes. And I should have been elated. Instead, I found myself dreading the moments when the performance ended. When Kalen would drop his hand from mine after we rounded a corner, when the warm, affectionate look in his eyes would shudder back into analytical calm. The lines had blurred so completely that I no longer knew where the character of Kalen's devoted girlfriend ended and the real Alara began. The intramural soccer finals were a case in point. Kalen was the star midfielder for the physics department team. Liam, despite his declining morale, was still a substitute for the business school team. It was another perfect stage. I sat in the stands with a group of Kalen's friends, sharp, funny people who debated string theory and postmodern literature with equal fervor. They had accepted me not as Liam's cast-off, but as one of their own. It felt more like home than any party with Liam's crowd ever had. When Kalen scored a breathtaking goal from nearly midfield, I was on my feet, screaming with genuine, unfeigned joy. He turned, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found me. He grinned, that rare, unreserved smile that transformed his whole face, and pointed directly at me. The gesture was so public, so possessive, and so utterly real that my breath caught. At halftime he jogged over to the sidelines, sweat-soaked and radiant. I handed him a water bottle and he drank deeply, his eyes never leaving mine. "Having fun?" he asked, his chest heaving. "Immensely," I said, and I meant it. "You're amazing out there." He leaned in close enough that I could feel the heat coming off his body. It's easy when you have the right motivation in the stands. Before I could process that, he was called back to the field. My heart was hammering. That hadn't been part of the script. The game ended in a victory for Kalen's team. As the players shook hands, I saw Liam on the sidelines, his shoulders slumped. He hadn't gotten a single minute of playtime. Kalen, still buzzing with adrenaline, slung an arm around my shoulders, pulling me into his side as we walked off the field. He smelled of grass, sweat, and triumph. It was then that Liam finally snapped. He cut us off, blocking our path to the parking lot. His face was contorted with an emotion I'd never seen in him before, pure, undiluted rage. "This has gone far enough," he snarled, his voice trembling. Kalen tightened his arm around me. "Problem, Miller? You know what the problem is." Liam spat, his finger jabbing in my direction. This whole pathetic charade. You're using her to get back at me, and she's so desperate and messed up she's letting you." The words were meant to wound, but they landed with the dull thud of an outdated weapon. I felt Kalen go rigid beside me. "Be very careful what you say next, Liam," Kalen said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Why? What are you going to do? You've already stolen my internship, now you're trying to steal my life? She's not even worth it, man. She's clingy and insecure, and she'll smother you just like she tried to smother me." There was the truth he'd never had the courage to say to my face. The real reason he'd strayed. It wasn't some grand, uncontrollable passion for Chloe. It was a coward's excuse. I expected to feel pain. Instead I felt nothing. A profound, cleansing nothing. This wasn't the boy I'd loved. He was a stranger. But before I could speak, Kalen did. He took a step forward, putting himself squarely between Liam and me. He wasn't taller than Liam, but he seemed to loom over him, his presence suddenly immense and threatening. "Don't you ever talk about her like that," Kalen said, each word a shard of ice. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You had something real, something brilliant and kind, and you threw it away because you're a shallow, selfish child who's terrified that someone might finally see how empty you really are." Liam blinked, stunned into silence. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Kalen continued, his voice low and lethal. "This wasn't a charade. Not for me. And for the record, I didn't steal your internship. You forfeited it the moment you decided to cheat instead of compete. And Alara." He glanced back at me, and his expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again as he faced Liam. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Losing her was the stupidest mistake you will ever make in your profoundly stupid life. Now get out of my way." Liam stood there, utterly broken. The anger had drained from his face, replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. He had lost. Not just the girl, not just the social standing, but any last shred of moral high ground. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, but I felt nothing. Kalen took my hand, his grip firm and sure, and led me around the shell of my ex-boyfriend. We walked to his car in silence. The adrenaline from the confrontation was still coursing through me, making my hands shake. He opened the passenger door for me and I slid in. He got in the driver's side but didn't start the engine. He just sat there, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The air in the car was thick with everything that had just happened. With everything he had just said. This wasn't a charade. Not for me. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I stared at his profile, at the tense line of his jaw. Kalen. He turned to look at me and the raw, unguarded emotion in his eyes stole the breath from my lungs. The walls were down. The performance was over. Every word I said to him was the truth. "Ilara," he said, his voice rough. "This started as a game. But it hasn't been a game for me in a long time." My heart was pounding, a wild, hopeful, terrifying rhythm. The revenge was complete. Liam was a broken man on a soccer field and I had my victory. But as I looked at Kalen, I realized the victory was meaningless. The revenge I had craved was a hollow prize compared to the terrifying, wonderful, real thing that was sitting in the car with me. The plan had been a success. But it had also become entirely, beautifully obsolete. The car ride back to my dorm was a silence so profound it felt like a physical entity. Kalen's confession hung between us, a truth bomb that had detonated the very foundation of our relationship. This wasn't a charade. Not for me. The words echoed in the quiet, rearranging the entire world. He pulled up to the curb but left the engine running, his gaze fixed straight ahead. The tension was a live wire, sparking and dangerous. "I should go," I said softly, my hand on the door handle. "Ilara, wait." His voice was strained. He finally turned to look at me, his face illuminated by the dashboard lights. He looked vulnerable, a side of him I'd only seen in fleeting, unguarded moments. "I meant what I said. I crossed a line back there. I know this was supposed to be about your revenge. I know I was just a means to an end. But I can't pretend anymore." My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm in love with you," he said, the words simple, direct, and utterly devastating. "I think I have been since the moment you walked up to me in the library with that fire in your eyes, talking about dismantling him. You were the most beautiful, terrifying thing I'd ever seen. And every day since it's just gotten worse. Or better. I don't know. I just know that this," he gestured between us, "is the most real thing I've ever been a part of." Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't tears of pain or anger. They were tears of overwhelming, terrifying relief. Because he was saying all the things I had been too afraid to even think. "This was never a means to an end, Kalen," I whispered, my voice thick. "You were never just a weapon. You were my sanctuary. You were the solid ground I found after the earthquake. I think I'm in love with you too." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. The moment the words left my lips, the carefully constructed world of our revenge plot dissolved into dust. It no longer mattered. None of it mattered. He let out a breath, a shaky, relieved sound, and then he was reaching for me. His hand cupped my cheek, his thumb stroking away a tear that had escaped. His touch was gentle, questioning. "Is this okay?" he murmured, his eyes searching mine. In answer, I closed the distance between us. The kiss was nothing like our practiced public displays. There was no audience to convince, no narrative to sell. It was slow and deep and achingly real. It was a confession, an apology, a promise. It tasted of truth and possibility and the sweet, shocking joy of a second chance I never saw coming. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. "So what happens now?" I asked, my forehead resting against his. "Now," he said, a genuine, breathtaking smile spreading across his face, "we go on a real date. No strategy sessions. No audience. Just you and me." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of a different kind. It was the quiet, delicious unraveling of a fake relationship into something breathtakingly genuine. We went on that date. A simple dinner at a tiny Italian place where we talked for hours about everything and nothing, our hands linked across the table. We went to the movies and actually watched the film, his arm a comfortable weight around my shoulders. We studied together, but now the silences were companionable, punctuated by soft kisses and shared smiles. The fall semester showcase came and went. We went, of course. Kaylin's presentation was brilliant, a stunning synthesis of technology and philosophy that earned him a standing ovation from the faculty. Liam's presentation was fine. Competent but uninspired. He looked hollowed out and he avoided looking in our direction the entire time. I felt a faint pang of something, not pity, but a distant recognition of a pain I had once known intimately. Then Kaylin squeezed my hand and the feeling vanished, replaced by the solid, warm reality of the present. The revenge was complete. It was a checkmate that had happened so naturally I barely registered the final move. One evening we were walking back from the library, our fingers laced together. The air was cold and our breath misted in the lamplight. "Do you ever think about it?" I asked. "The plan? Does it feel, I don't know, anticlimactic?" He shook his head. "No. It feels like we built a scaffold to reach something and once we got there we didn't need it anymore so we kicked it away. The scaffold served its purpose. What we built on top of it is what matters." He stopped walking and turned to face me, his expression serious in the golden light. "I need you to know something," he said. "What I feel for you has nothing to do with him. It never did. It was always about you. Your strength. Your fire. Your mind. The way you look at the world. Him. He was just the catalyst. The unfortunate chemical that caused a beautiful reaction." Tears welled in my eyes again. He had a way of saying the exact thing I needed to hear, of seeing the parts of me I was most proud of. "I know," I said, my voice steady. "It's the same for me. Loving you feels like the first real independent decision I've made in years. It has nothing to do with my past. It's all about my future." He leaned in and kissed me, a soft, lingering kiss that held the promise of that future. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, was finally, completely behind us. We had orchestrated a perfect revenge, but in the process, we had stumbled into a second love that was more profound and powerful than any vengeance could ever be. The game was over. Our life was just beginning. The end of the semester arrived cloaked in the frantic energy of finals and the bittersweet promise of winter break. For the first time in my life, the approach of a long separation from campus didn't fill me with dread, but with a quiet, steady excitement. Because I wasn't just leaving a place, I was leaving a version of myself. The ghost of the girl who had loved Liam had been thoroughly exorcised, her space filled with a light and a strength I owed entirely to the unexpected, terrifying, wonderful turn my life had taken. Kaylin and I had become a fixed point in the campus universe. Kaylin and Alara was no longer a hyphenated word born of strategy, but a single cohesive entity. We were the couple who held hands during stressful finals, who brought each other coffee, who debated passionately over dinner and then fell into easy, comfortable silence. The performance was a distant memory, a prologue to our real story. The day before I was due to leave for my parents' house, Kaylin showed up at my dorm room with a backpack and a determined glint in his eye. "No studying today," he announced. "We're playing hooky." "Hooky from what?" "Finals are over," I laughed, but I was already grabbing my coat. He took me on a road trip. No destination, just driving with the windows down despite the cold, singing along badly to the radio, his hand resting on my knee. We ended up at a state park an hour away, the landscape stark and beautiful in its winter barrenness. We hiked a deserted trail to a frozen-over lookout point, the world spread out below us in shades of gray and white. We stood there for a long time, watching our breath plume in the still air, his arm a warm, solid weight around my shoulders. "I'm going to miss you," he said quietly, his voice the only sound in the vast quiet. 3 weeks, I said, leaning my head against his arm. "It'll fly by. It feels like a lifetime." I turned to face him. "It's just a pause. Not an ending." He smiled, that slow, transformative smile that was now my favorite sight in the world. "I know. I want you to know what this has meant to me. You didn't just help me get revenge on Liam. You showed me what it was like to not be alone. To have a partner. Someone who sees the sharp edges and doesn't flinch, but instead trusts you to wield them wisely." My throat tightened. You saw the broken pieces of me and didn't try to put them back the way they were. You helped me build something new out of them. Something stronger. He cupped my face in his gloved hands, his eyes serious. I love you, Alara. So much. I love you too, Kaylin. He kissed me then, a kiss that was a seal on a promise, a vow for all the days that would come after the 3-week pause. It was a kiss that held the memory of the pain that had brought us together, and the breathtaking hope of the future we would build together. When we finally pulled apart, the sun was beginning to set, painting the frozen landscape in hues of rose and gold. Come on, he said, taking my hand. Let's go home. The day I left, he drove me to the bus station. It was a practical, unromantic location, filled with the smell of diesel and the sound of idling engines. But he made it feel like a scene from a movie. He carried my bag, held my hand, and when the bus hissed to a stop, he pulled me into a hug that felt like it could defy time and distance. Text me when you get there, he murmured into my hair. I will. Every day. He kissed me, a soft, lingering kiss that held a universe of feeling. Go on. Before I do something dramatic like stow away in your luggage. I boarded the bus, my heart a tangled knot of sadness and joy. I found a window seat and watched him standing on the pavement, his hands shoved in his pockets, his breath misting in the cold air. He didn't look away until the bus pulled out of the station and he was lost from view. As the city gave way to countryside, I leaned my head against the cool glass and replayed the last few months in my mind. The searing pain under the oak tree. The cold, clear resolve that followed. The first time I saw Kaylin. The whispered conspiracies in the library. The dizzying success of the Sigma Chi party. The late-night study sessions that became confessionals. The raw truth in his eyes after the soccer game. The feeling of his hand in mine not as an act but as a home. Liam was a footnote now. A lesson learned. I heard through the campus grapevine that he and Chloe had broken up over the break. There was no satisfaction in the news, only a distant, quiet acknowledgement. His breakdown had been the catalyst for my rebirth, but it was no longer the point. The point was the man waiting for me to return, the man who had turned my revenge into a rescue and my second love into my first real one. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kaylin. Kaylin, the apartment is too quiet. Zeus is moping. I'm moping. Come back soon. I smiled, my heart swelling with a love so profound it felt like a physical force. Me 3 weeks. Then it's you, me, and a mopey golden retriever against the world. Kaylin, I like those odds. I put my phone away and watched the world fly by. The girl who had gotten on the bus was not the same one who had arrived at Northwood a few months ago. That girl had been defined by her relationship, her happiness contingent on another person's affection. I put my phone away and watched the world fly by. The girl who had gotten on the bus was not the same one who had arrived at Northwood a few months ago. That girl had been defined by her relationship, her happiness contingent on another person's affection. The woman on this bus was defined by her own strength, forged in fire and cooled in the waters of a second chance. She had orchestrated a sweet revenge, but she had been gifted a love that was infinitely sweeter. The story that had begun with a betrayal was ending. No, not ending, beginning, with a promise. And I had never been more ready for what came next. The end.